Nehemiah 7 is an interesting passage for us to look at this morning. And you may be wondering, what is there here in Nehemiah 7 for us today? Well, don't fret. I was kind of wondering the same thing myself. A few days ago, when I started working on this message, I was trying to think through whether or not it would be okay for us to just skip this part and move on to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is pretty exciting. There's a lot of really good preaching in chapter 8. But chapter 7 was a little harder to dig into. But the more I read it, the more convinced I was that it would be wrong of us to skip over this passage because of some of the important truths that are contained in here that I think are very applicable to our church at this point in our history. I haven't spoken much about it in Nehemiah intentionally, but as I look at Nehemiah chapter 7, I can't help but think about our own project here at the Baptist Tabernacle that we are going to finish very soon. You say, wait a second, very soon? It looks like a mess out there. Yes, it does look a little bit of a mess, but if you think about it, this is a process that we started over 2 years ago. And now here we are. We're just about 6 months away from being done with phase 1. And so I think it's okay for us to say that we're nearing the completion of a multi-year process. And I'm so grateful for each one of you that has been here through the whole thing, or you came here knowing what we were doing and you stayed anyways. And so I think at this point in our history, it's good for us to look at this chapter. It's exciting to think about. It's exciting for me to think about the new spaces that we will have to enjoy once this project is over. It's also exciting to think about the prospect of not being in a building program like we've been in for the last 2 years in just another couple of months. And just another couple of months, we'll be done with this part. I mean, and let's be honest, once we're done with this, we can just all kind of kick back and relax and just take it easy because we'll be set until Jesus comes. I know Brother Jim doesn't really believe that, and I don't think you really believe that either, do you? No. If you do, then you're probably not at the right church. I'll explain this more in a minute, but here in our passage, Nehemiah has just finished the construction of the wall. And yet Nehemiah is still looking to the future, and he's looking for guidance as to what's going to happen in the future by digging up the past. Now, I know a lot of times if you go to therapy or counseling, they'll say, don't dig up the past, just let it be. But Nehemiah finds guidance and encouragement by looking to the past. And so I think that's something good for us to do this morning. And I think if you'd be honest, that's kind of what we do every week, isn't it? Every week we come here, we open up the Word of God, a book that was written thousands of years ago. We look to the past for guidance for our future. Now, what kind of answers will we find this morning? Well, to begin with, I want to first ask the question, what makes chapter 7 special? Because chapter 7 seems like the kind of chapter you'd skip in your devotionals if you came upon it. You're like, all these names? No way. We'll just go on to the next assignment. But chapter 7 is interesting because it is almost a direct copy and paste job from Ezra chapter 2. Now, we've got some teachers in here, and teachers become pretty adept at noticing when a student just copies and pastes something that they saw on Wikipedia and try to include it into their paper as if no one's going to notice. So, here's Nehemiah, and all you students out there, you could claim it's biblical, because what he does is he takes what Ezra had written in chapter 2, he copies the whole thing and pastes it into his own book. He gets a whole chapter from some other author. Now, you may not be familiar with Ezra and what his life was really about, but Nehemiah and Ezra actually lived at the same time period. They were contemporaries with each other. And if you read ahead to chapter number 8, you'll see that Ezra will pop up in Nehemiah's book next week in our chapter that we'll look at then. Ezra had arrived in Jerusalem many years before Nehemiah had gotten there. He played a large role in the rebuilding of the Jewish faith after the construction of the temple was completed. And so, as we come to chapter 7, I just really couldn't justify in my heart skipping over it, seeing as how God chose to include these words twice in the Bible. And, I would encourage you, go ahead and read the names, because let's be honest, if your name was in the Bible, you wouldn't want that verse skipped over, would you? No, unless it was like Delilah or Jezebel or something like that, and then you'd be like, yeah, just go ahead and skip that part. But since God included it twice, we should probably look at it and see what there is for us. Now, since we know that this is an excerpt from Ezra's book, we also know that what we're reading about predates Nehemiah and therefore predates the work on the wall. Now, when I first started reading it, before I started getting into what's actually going on here, I thought maybe this was just a report of how different people had contributed to the work of rebuilding the wall. But that's not what's going on here at all. Ezra, as I said just a moment ago, came to Jerusalem right after the completion of the temple. The new temple was built. It was a whole dramatic thing. You got people crying because it's not as good as Solomon's temple. You got people cheering because, hey, at least we have a temple. It was quite an ordeal. Maybe one day we'll look at Ezra's life. But Ezra comes in right after the temple is completed, and he is tasked with restoring faithful fellowship or faithful worship in Jerusalem. They'd been away for 70 years, and let's be honest, before they left, things weren't going so good then either. And so Ezra has come along to try and help the Jewish people to get back to a healthy relationship with God. Now, even though both Nehemiah and Ezra were faithful men of God, we know that while one built walls, Ezra built up lives. And when he arrived, the lives were not in very good shape. Things were not good spiritually in the city when Ezra comes on the scene. There are a lot of problems that he'll have to address. Some of them are quite deeply rooted within the society and culture there. But one thing, and you may not agree with this, but one thing I've learned is that no matter how many problems there are, there is usually always something good to build off of. If you come to a situation, if you are counseling with someone, you're advising someone, you come to a new job and you're meant to turn things around, you may look around or you may listen and say, there is no redeeming value to be found here. But that is not usually the case. If you look hard enough and close enough, there is almost always something good that you can build off of. That was true for Ezra. When he got to Jerusalem, there were some encouraging signs that Ezra could hold on to. And one of those signs has to do with something that happened just before he arrived and is recorded for us in the passage that we read, starting in verse number 70. In the end of chapter 7, we see a record of how the people had gotten behind the efforts to rebuild the temple by investing their money into the project. What did Jesus say about the location of our treasure? Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Are there massive spiritual problems in Jerusalem at the rebuilding of the temple? Yes, absolutely. But there was one sign that was very encouraging for Ezra, and I believe for us as well. The people may not have been where they needed to be yet, but their willingness to invest in the temple project was a good sign that they were ready to change. You don't have to have it all together to begin heading in the right direction, do you? I mean, that's the whole point of a journey, is to get from where you are to where you need to be. And it'd be kind of foolish to say, well, I'm not even going to try to attempt this journey unless I can make it there with one step. Because you can't get very far with one step. But if you don't ever start with one step, you're never going to get to where you want to be. So the first step that we see here is the rebuilding of the building that had come to symbolize the nation's relationship with God. Change has to start somewhere. Are there some things you wish would change in your life? Anybody besides myself? Okay, a few hands. All right, yeah. Of course there's things we wish would change in our life. It'll never happen until you take the first step. So don't judge the people because they're getting involved by investing in the temple, but they're married to pagans and they're doing all kinds of other weird and unbiblical things. They're starting with the first thing that they can do, and that is getting the temple built. Change oftentimes can work from the bottom up. I don't know if you've ever heard of the children's revival that took place in the United Kingdom back in the 1800s. Basically, revival swept through England and its territories, but it all started with a couple of kids that started praying and got really dedicated and decided that they wanted to be serious about serving God, and it kind of spread to other children's ministries and then worked its way up into the young adults, and eventually the parents got on fire for the Lord, but it all started with children. You don't typically think of that happening, but it can. But usually we expect that change would work its way from the top down. And we get a glimpse of this in Ezra and Nehemiah's record of the temple project. The first person that Ezra points out and Nehemiah reminds us got involved with giving a gift to the temple was the Tirshatha. If you look at verse number 70, it says, the Tirshatha gave to the treasure 1,000 drams of gold. Now, don't you love the Tirshatha? Like, if I was to ask you who your favorite Bible character is, I bet Brother Jeffrey would say, well, I love the Tirshatha. And Brother Mike Morgan would say, yeah, the Tirshatha is my favorite character in the Bible. I just love talking about the Tirshatha. It's actually a fun word to say. You should say it. Tirshatha. Tirshatha. What even is that, right? Oh, you've already got it up there. Oh, man. Who made that? The Tirshatha is just another word for the governor. And here we have the governor at this time. His name is Zerubbabel. Talk about another word that's fun to say. But Zerubbabel, as the governor of Judea, sets the tone for the rest of the nation by giving the first gift to the temple. Now, there are other valuable and needed gifts that are mentioned in this passage, but I want us to consider just the gold that is donated to the temple project. The Bible tells us that the Tirshatha, Zerubbabel, donates 1,000 drams of gold. Now, this is the equivalent of 19 pounds of gold in today's money. You can see that roughly approximates to about $700,000. I'm going to call up Kevin Stitt tomorrow when his office opens and ask for a donation to the building project and see what he says. Now, this is a significant gift, not just on its own, but because of what this gift inspired. Here we have the top political officer in the region giving a gift to a spiritual building project of 1,000 drams of gold, $700,000. That's significant for an individual. It's not enough to get the job done, though. But look what his gift had an impact and inspired others to do. The Bible says that after the governor, who was seeking to motivate the people, gave his gift, others began to step up as well. The Bible says in verse number 71 that some of the chief of the fathers gave to the treasurer of the work 20,000 drams of gold and 2,200 pounds of silver. 20,000 drams of gold. That's a lot more than 1,000 drams of gold. This is the equivalent of 375 pounds of gold, or approximately $13.6 million. Not a bad gift. That's a lot. I wonder if this would have happened if the Tirshatha had not gotten on board first. If the governor hadn't given towards it and made this a priority in his administration and then put his support personally behind it, would the chiefs of the fathers been as ready to get behind it as well? Finally, Nehemiah records that the rest of the people made a collection and presented it to the work. The Bible says in verse number 72 that the rest of the people gave 20,000 drams of gold. All right, so here we have another 13.6 million added to the total gift for the temple. Now, it's not exactly 13.6, it's actually a little bit over. And so if you add them all together, you're just over $30 million for the construction of a new temple. What kind of building could we make today with $30 million? Our budget for this project is $3 million. So let's imagine building a building 10 times what we're trying to construct here at our church. And you say, well, yeah, but we're only, 300 people. They were a whole city. And so, yeah, they should have raised a lot of money. That's true. But remember, these are people that are just coming back from exile. These are people who have not been embedded in their society for very long. They're basically just getting back from being exiled many thousands of miles away. Remember when Nehemiah traveled back, it took 3 months just to make the trip back. And so these are not a bunch of individually wealthy people. These are common people. These are normal people. But we see it starts at the top with the governor. It goes down to the heads of the households of Israel, and then just the rest of the people work together, and they're able to raise $30 million for the new temple. The people may have had some hesitancy about getting behind the project. They may have been unsure if it was really going to get off the ground. They may have questioned if there was enough unity among the people to actually get this accomplished. Maybe there were individuals amongst the people of Israel who felt like, yes, we need to build a new temple. This is something that needs to be done. But they knew it would take more than just a few to get it done. Whatever it was, when the people saw their governor and the leaders of the families of Israel participating, then they got behind the project and they did their part too. And so the temple, though delayed, was completed before Ezra or Nehemiah entered the city. Now I want you to think about this for a second. Zerubbabel brings a group of people back and leads them to rebuild the temple. Then Ezra comes in and he says, your lives are a mess. We need to rebuild your lives. So they're rebuilding the temple. They're working hard to rebuild their lives. Then Nehemiah comes along and says, all right, y'all, about that wall. It needs to be rebuilt too. I mean, the people have been busy with other projects, both personally and corporately. They have been investing their time and resources into making the city a better place. You would think that they would have been a little put out when Nehemiah came by and said, I know you just finished a couple of projects, but it's time to start another one. I mean, after all, Nehemiah had been living that cushy life in Persia while they labored to build the temple. Nehemiah had been many thousands of miles away while Ezra was pointing out their sins and calling the people to repentance. Then he just shows up and tries to tell them that after all they've done, now he needs them to help rebuild the wall. I think I might have said, dude, we're tired. Don't you know what we've been through? We need a break. If you want a wall so bad, you go build the wall. But they didn't say that, did they? Do you remember the people's response in Nehemiah chapter 2? After Nehemiah has laid out the need, he's reminded them that God is on their side, that God has blessed them up to that point. Nehemiah 2:18 says, then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, and as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. You see, from the top to the bottom, the people had banded together to build the temple. And then, when asked to participate in building the wall, some of those same people gave again to see their city rebuilt. They had a passion and a commitment that caused them to give and keep giving. 1 project, 2 projects, 3 projects, it didn't matter. They were going to be a part of the progress. So what can we learn from these last few verses? Well, I think we can see that it matters when leadership, leads. Doesn't it matter when those that are in leadership actually take the first steps? It's not that leadership is the only one that can do anything. But it is supposed to be that leadership is one of the first to do it. I mean, would we be here if the officers of the church had said, look, Pastor, we know the city's growing and we like the idea of a new building. I mean, people like things that are new. but we're just not sure if this is the right course. So, and the deacons don't talk like this, but I'm just pretending. So, well, let's put it to a vote. And let's just see if the church will get behind it. And if the church will commit to the money, then we'll be okay with it. That's not the way things work. That's not the way we did things. The Lord put it on our hearts, and we discussed it, and we talked about it. We came to the conclusion that this is the direction that we needed to go. We voted on it as the leaders of the church, and we presented it to the church as, hey, we believe this is what needs to happen. And the officers of the church got behind it, not only with their votes and their verbal support, they got behind it in giving, and then the church followed. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way it's worked here. And it makes a difference when people in leadership don't sit on the sides and just tell people what to do, but instead they are actually effective leaders, and being an effective leader requires you to be in the middle of what's happening. We've had lots of our officers show up to help with different things in accordance with this project, whether it be planning meetings at the beginning, whether it be the question and answer times. I don't know if you remember this, but we had several of our officers get up on the platform and speak to why they believed we needed to do this. We've had officers over there in the old auditorium helping to tear things down. We've had officers here helping to set the gym up. The people that God has placed as leaders in this church, they have been involved with this project from the very, very beginning. And that's the way it should be. Being an effective leader requires you to be in the middle of what is happening, not sitting on the sidelines. So we see that in this passage. We see that it worked for the children of Israel. The governor, the chiefs of the fathers, the people, all working together to get something done. None of them could have done it on their own. Together they got it done. But we can also see that celebrating one victory doesn't mean we're done working. Let's apply, this to evangelism. Don't we love it when someone gets saved and then they get baptized? They get plugged into the church, and they start ministering, sharing their gift with the body. What a blessing that is to see that happen. Do we see one person get saved and say, all right, we've done our job. We're done now. Forget hogs and hot rods, forget VBS, forget Easter, all that stuff. We're done. We reached one soul, and the song says if it's just one, it'd be worth it all. So we're done. We wouldn't do that with evangelism. Too many people, I think, forget the fact that there is a war going on spiritually, not just a battle. When you were a kid, did you ever get those two words confused? Maybe it's just me. I didn't realize that a battle was just one segment of a larger war. But we're not in a battle. We're in a war. When a battle is won, you don't celebrate the end of the war. You regroup and you march to the next battle. Israel, when we think of their history, they had been losing ground for decades. For decades they've been going further and further and further back. Well, here comes Zerubbabel, rebuilding the temple. They've lost a lot of ground. And so, hey, the temple's rebuilt. Yay! Yeah, but you still have a lot of lost ground to cover. Hey, there's a revival in Jerusalem. People are getting right with God. Yay! Yeah, but the wall's still in ruins. The whole city is a reproach. Nehemiah comes along and says, hey, we need to rebuild. And people say, yeah, you're right, we do. And so another battle is won. The reconstruction of the temple was just one step in the right direction. Success is more than one step. Success is more than one victory in battle. It is step after step, battle after battle, until total victory is won and the race is won. Today, the Dallas Cowboys will play their first game against the Cleveland Browns. I'm not very hopeful. Brother Dustin asked me this morning, is this y'all's year? I said, nope. It's just reality. It's okay. But I guarantee you, if the Dallas Cowboys win today, there will be people on Twitter saying, this is our year. We them boys. They'll be celebrating the Super Bowl, and it's just one game. And all of the NFL world will rightly laugh at the Cowboys fans because they won one game and they think they won it all. But when you've been a Cowboys fan for as long as some of us have, one game you just got to celebrate the victories where you can get them. So how can we apply this to our lives? Well, I think the first thing is this: leaders have got to lead. You say, well, I'm not an officer in the church. I'm not a Sunday school teacher. I'm not on staff. I'm not the pastor. How am I a leader? Everyone here is leading someone. We've said this before. Everyone is a leader of someone. Even if you're an older sibling, you have younger siblings that are looking up to you. And they're basing their what they do off of what they see you do. And so everyone here is a leader. Hayden, it'll not be very long before little Hannah's going to look at you like, Big Bubba, what am I supposed to do here? And she will base her actions off what she sees you do. Whether Isaac wants to admit it or not, Brooklyn, he's watching you to see how you handle things. And he thinks you're the greatest. He thinks you're cool. And he wants... No? Okay. Everyone is leading someone. And if you work around people, someone is looking up to you. You have to ask yourself the question, what kind of impact am I having on them? And when you think about Zerubbabel and the chiefs of the fathers and the way they impacted the people that were looking up to them, you have to realize that you have the same responsibility to inspire others to follow the Lord just like they did. Are you inspiring them to give their best? Are you blazing a trail of how to get the job accomplished? Are you using your influence at work or in the neighborhood or at school to show people what a genuine Christian life looks like? He said, man, I thought he was going to tell us we had to give more. I'm asking you to use your leadership to influence others. That's what I think the lesson here is with Zerubbabel and the chiefs of the fathers. They used the influence they had to lead others to follow God, to serve the Lord. They were a light in their community for what was right. How are you using your influence to better those around you? Most importantly, how are you leading others to know and serve Jesus? We have young people, we have teenagers in our church that come faithfully, and no one makes them come. I was very encouraged a couple weeks ago after a young man in our community was killed in a car accident. They had a service at the football field, and several of our young men were there. And if you could have seen them, the way they were interacting and standing up for what was right, and just their testimony there on that football field, I was so encouraged to see them do that. We have others that are involved in different ways at their school, and we've got our good news clubs that are starting, and we'll have kids from our church that will come and will invite other kids to come and be a part of that. But what can we see in our adults? How can our adults use their leadership, use their influence to influence others to give their lives to God? We've got some folks in our church that are very evangelistic. And it is rare for them to go a long time without bringing somebody to church or inviting someone to church. And it's incredible to watch because it's exactly what we see happening in the Bible. Whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament, we are supposed to be using our influence to lead others and draw others to Christ. Leaders have to lead. But then the other thing is, we have to keep pushing forward. I am grateful for so much that has been accomplished in the last 70 years of our church's history. But I have to ask you this question. Are we satisfied with where we are and what we've done, such that we don't see a need to do any more? Obviously, you say, well, obviously the answer is no. We're working on a building. Okay. And maybe I'm asking myself this more than I'm asking you, but once that building's done, are we just going to sit back and relax and enjoy the fruits of our labors? Or do we have the appetite, the desire to see God do more? I sure hope that we won't be satisfied. Jesus, after all, so as of right now, okay, it didn't change. So as of right now, still not. Okay, as of right now, Jesus has not yet come back. Unless we're all lost and the rapture happens somewhere else. But he has not come back. Our town keeps growing, which tells me it is not time for the Baptist Tabernacle to sit back and live off of yesterday's accomplishments. We have a responsibility to stay in the fight for the souls of Collinsville. The people of Jerusalem were ready to push ahead, though they had already invested and sacrificed so much. I have to say, this church has already invested and sacrificed so much. And I'm grateful that there are still many who are looking forward to the next battle, to the next project, to the next soul that we could reach. You see, we look to the past to learn how we should view our future. And if we look at Nehemiah, we see a people who had fought battle after battle after battle. They had completed project after project after project. And yet when Nehemiah showed up and said, guys, I've got another one, they said in Nehemiah 2:18, let us rise up and build. I'm not the Holy Spirit, so don't accuse me of messing with the Bible. But I think you could legitimately say, let us rise up and build again. God shows us in this story that the answer for our church was the same answer for Jerusalem. We need leaders to lead, and we need to keep pressing forward. I don't know about you, but I am excited to see where God will lead us next. We're coming to the close of this period. I know it still seems like there's a lot to do, and there is, but before you know it, it'll be done. What does God have for us next? I'm excited to think about it. You should think about it too. It's your church. You're part of this body. You're part of this building. Let's think for a moment. What could God have next for the Baptist Tabernacle once that is done? What could God have for the Baptist Tabernacle next after Sunday is done? We have to have a future, a vision for the future. And yes, leaders have to lead in presenting that. But you're a priest unto God. What do you see in the future for the Baptist Tabernacle? It's an exciting thing to think about, and I hope you'll think about it with me. Let's pray.